I'll never forget the moment my heart broke in front of 100 strangers. I walked into the church that afternoon, wearing the best suit I owned, holding on to nothing but hope that maybe, just maybe, my son would see me as more than just a mistake from his past. But instead of a smile, instead of an embrace, I got words that cut sharper than any knife. "Dad, I'm sorry, but you weren't invited. Please go away." That was it. That was all my son had to say to me on what was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. Let me back up for a second, because you need to know who I am and who they are before you can understand just how deep that moment went. My name's Mark Dalton, I'm 52 years old, and I'm not the kind of man who gives up on his family easily. I was raised to believe that blood is everything, that a father's job is to provide no matter how hard it gets. And God knows it got hard. My son's name is Ethan. He's 26 now, smart, ambitious, the kind of kid who always had bigger dreams than the small town we lived in. I raised him mostly on my own after my ex-wife, Linda, decided she wanted a new life without me in it. I won't pretend I was the perfect husband, far from it, but I tried to be the best father I could. I worked nights as an electrician, took every overtime shift, and when Ethan got accepted into college, I nearly broke my back to make sure every tuition bill was covered. Then there's Linda. She's the kind of woman who could light up a room just by walking in, but also the kind who could tear you down with a single glance. She and I haven't spoken much in years, except through the occasional email about finances. I knew she'd be at the wedding, smiling like nothing ever happened, probably whispering in Ethan's ear about how much better his life turned out without me. And then there's Ray. Ray Miller has been my best friend since we were 15. We grew up together, worked summer jobs together, even helped each other build our first houses. Ray's the kind of friend who'll tell you the truth whether you like it or not. And that morning, before we drove to the wedding, he sat across from me in my kitchen, shaking his head like I was about to walk into a fire. "You sure about this, Mark?" he asked, sipping his coffee. "Didn't Ethan make it pretty clear he didn't want you there?" I straightened my tie in the mirror and tried to convince myself as much as him. "He's my son, Ray. He might not like me, but I can't just skip his wedding. Maybe this is my chance to make things right. Maybe seeing me there will remind him that I've always been around, even if he didn't want me to be." Ray sighed, the way only a lifelong friend can, and muttered, "Or maybe he'll throw you out in front of everybody. Just be ready for that." I should have listened. When I walked into that church, I didn't storm in like some angry ex-dad trying to ruin the party. No, I came in quietly, respectfully, trying not to draw attention. I wanted to be invisible until the right moment. Maybe after the ceremony, when I could shake Ethan's hand and tell him how proud I was. But fate didn't even give me that much time. I spotted him near the altar, dressed in a black tuxedo, looking sharper than I'd ever seen him. My heart swelled with pride. That was my boy, my Ethan. For a brief second, I thought maybe he'd smile, maybe he'd nod, maybe he'd just let me stand in the back. Instead, his face hardened the moment his eyes met mine. He walked straight over, fast enough that a few guests turned their heads, and then he said it, loud enough for people around us to hear. "Dad, I'm sorry, but you weren't invited." "Please go away." I froze. My throat tightened, but no words came out. I wanted to say, "Son, I paid for this wedding. Son, I love you. Son, please don't do this." But the lump in my chest was so heavy I couldn't breathe, let alone speak. Behind him, I caught a glimpse of Linda, standing tall with her arms crossed, not saying a word, not even blinking. It was as if she'd been waiting for this moment, waiting for Ethan to push me out of the picture once and for all. Guests began to whisper. Some looked at me with pity, others with judgment. I could feel their eyes burning into my back. Ray put a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Come on, Mark, let's just go." And so I did, quietly, without another word. But here's what no one knew at that moment. 3 hours later, everything would change. The laughter, the dancing, the toasts, it would all come crashing down. Because without me, there was no wedding. To understand why that rejection at the church cut so deep, you need to know who I am and what my life has been about. My name is Mark Dalton. I'm 52 years old, and for the last 25 years my entire world has revolved around one person, my son, Ethan. I didn't grow up with much. My father worked in a steel mill, my mother was a homemaker, and money was always tight. But what my father did teach me was this: a man provides, no matter what, no excuses. Those words burned into me like scripture, and when Ethan was born, I swore I'd live by them. The day he came into this world was the happiest day of my life. I still remember holding him for the first time, his tiny hand gripping my finger like he was saying, "Don't let go, Dad." And I didn't. Not through the sleepless nights, not through the bills piling up, not even when his mother, Linda, walked out. Linda and I had been high school sweethearts, the kind of couple everyone thought would last forever. But marriage is harder than the movies make it look. By the time Ethan turned 8, Linda was gone, chasing what she called a better life. I didn't fight her when she filed for divorce. I didn't have the strength. What I did fight for was Ethan, and although the court gave Linda primary custody, I was always there. Ball games, doctor's appointments, parent-teacher meetings, I never missed. I worked as an electrician, sometimes pulling 70 hours a week, to make sure Ethan had what he needed. When he wanted to join the travel baseball team, I found a way to pay the fees. When he needed braces, I picked up every extra job I could. And when he got into college, out of state, tuition higher than I could even imagine, I didn't tell him no. I told him, I'll make it work. And then I nearly broke myself to keep that promise. But love and sacrifice don't always buy gratitude. Somewhere along the way, Ethan started to see me less as the man who raised him and more as the man who failed Linda. She was always better with words, always better at spinning stories. And I know she didn't make it easy for him to love me. Still, I believed in second chances. I believed that maybe someday he'd look back and realize I was there when it mattered most. That's what carried me through the years when our phone calls got shorter, when the holidays grew colder, when I started noticing I wasn't being invited to family gatherings anymore. So when the wedding came around, and the invitation never showed up in my mailbox, I told myself it had to be a mistake. No son would keep his father away from the most important day of his life. I convinced myself that deep down, Ethan still wanted me there. That morning, as I buttoned up a brand new Navy suit I'd saved up to buy, I felt like maybe it was the start of something new. I practiced what I would say to him in the mirror. I'm proud of you, son. No matter what's happened between us, I'm proud. My throat tightened every time I rehearsed it, but I told myself I had to get it out, had to make him hear it. Ray was there with me that morning because he knew I shouldn't go alone. He sat at my kitchen table, watching me tie my shoes, shaking his head like a man who'd seen this story before. "Mark," he said, his voice low and heavy, "you're walking into fire. That boy doesn't want you there." I kept fiddling with my cufflinks, not looking at him. "He's still my son, Ray. What kind of father would I be if I just stayed home?" He leaned back in his chair, sighed through his nose, and muttered, "The kind of father who doesn't end up humiliated in front of 200 people. I forced a smile, though it felt more like a grimace. "Maybe you're wrong. Maybe today's the day things change." But the truth was, I was terrified. My palms were sweating before I even left the house. Every mile we drove to that church, my stomach churned with the fear that Ray was right, that I wasn't going to be welcomed, that maybe, in my son's eyes, I really wasn't part of his family anymore. And yet, I went, because love makes fools out of all of us. Because when you've spent your whole life believing your son is the one thing you did right, you'd rather face humiliation than regret not showing up at all. As the church came into view, packed with cars and decorated with flowers, my heart pounded against my ribs. I told myself, "This is it, Mark. This is your moment. Walk in there with your head high. Show him you still care." I had no idea that within minutes all those hopes would shatter with a single sentence. The church was alive with joy when I walked through those double doors. Music floated softly from the string quartet near the altar, and everywhere I looked, people were smiling, hugging, and taking photos. The pews were filled with family, friends, and colleagues, all dressed to the nines. It should have been a beautiful moment. And maybe for everyone else it was, but for me, every step I took felt heavier than the last. I kept my head down, trying to move quietly along the side aisle, hoping no one would notice me. I wasn't there to make a scene. I wasn't there to cause trouble. I just wanted to see my boy on the biggest day of his life. I wanted to be a father, even if it was only from the shadows. But fate doesn't let you hide when your heart is exposed. From across the room, I saw him. Ethan, my son, my pride and joy, standing near the altar in a crisp black tuxedo, his hair neatly combed, his posture tall, his expression calm as he spoke with a few groomsmen. For a moment, I forgot every bitter word, every cold silence between us. My heart swelled with pride, and I thought to myself, "That's my boy. Look at him. I did something right." I must have been staring too long because suddenly his eyes caught mine. At first there was surprise, like he wasn't sure if he was seeing what he thought he was. Then, in an instant, that surprise turned to something colder. His jaw tightened, his face hardened, and before I could even take another step, he started walking toward me. The sound of his shoes against the marble floor echoed louder than the music in my ears. Guests began to notice. Conversations trailed off. I felt 100 eyes shift in my direction, whispers buzzing in the air like bees. When Ethan reached me, he didn't hug me. He didn't smile. He didn't even lower his voice. Instead, he looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Dad, I'm sorry, but you weren't invited. Please go away." It was like someone had knocked the air out of my lungs. My mouth opened, but no words came out. I wanted to say so much. "I'm proud of you. I love you. Please don't do this." But all I could do was stand there, frozen, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. Behind him, I caught sight of Linda, my ex-wife. She stood with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable, but I knew that look. It was satisfaction. She didn't need to say anything. Ethan had just done her work for her. He had cut me out right there in front of everyone. The whispers grew louder. Some guests stared at me with pity, others with judgment. I could feel their eyes drilling into me, as if I were some unwelcome intruder crashing a private celebration. I turned my head slightly and there was Ray, standing a few feet behind me, his face tight with anger. He leaned in and whispered urgently, "Mark, don't do this. Let's just go." "Don't give them the satisfaction." I looked back at Ethan, desperate to see even a flicker of hesitation, a glimmer of the boy I used to know. But there was nothing. His eyes were cold, his voice steady, and his hand gestured toward the door as if to say, "Leave now." For a moment, I thought about fighting back. I thought about raising my voice, reminding everyone there that I wasn't just some outsider. I was the man who had paid for nearly everything that day, the venue, the caterer, the photographer. All of it had been made possible because I worked myself to the bone to give my son the wedding he wanted. But I didn't. Because no matter how much pride burned in my chest, no matter how much humiliation threatened to drown me, I couldn't be the man who ruined his son's wedding. So I nodded. Just a small, broken nod, and without another word I turned and walked out of the church. Each step toward the door felt like dragging chains behind me. My shoes scuffed against the tile, echoing in the silence that followed me. When I reached the doors and pushed them open, the bright sunlight hit me in the face, almost blinding. I stumbled into it like a man waking from a nightmare, except this nightmare wasn't ending. Outside, Ray caught up to me. He grabbed my arm, his voice low but fierce. "You don't deserve that, Mark. He had no right to do that to you." I pulled my arm free, staring at the ground, my throat tight with unshed tears. "He's my son," I whispered, the words cracking. "If he doesn't want me there, then I can't force it." Ray shook his head, cursing under his breath. "You're too good for your own damn heart." We stood in silence for a long moment. The muffled sounds of laughter and music spilled out from inside the church, a cruel reminder of the world I had just been shut out of. That was the moment I realized something I never wanted to admit. My son didn't just forget me. He didn't just overlook me. He had erased me. And as I walked back to my car, the humiliation burned deep, but under it all, something else started to flicker. A thought I couldn't ignore. They may not have wanted me there, but they sure as hell wanted what I had given them. And without me, none of this would stand. The drive home from the church felt endless. The sun was bright, but the world outside my windshield looked gray, washed out, lifeless. I kept hearing Ethan's words on a loop in my head. "Dad, I'm sorry, but you weren't invited. Please go away," over and over, until it felt like each syllable was carved into my chest. Ray sat in the passenger seat, silent for most of the ride. He knew better than to poke at a wound that fresh, but as we hit the highway, he finally let out a long sigh. "Mark," he said carefully, "I've known you my whole life. You've taken a lot of punches, but this was low, lower than anything I've ever seen." I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My knuckles were white, veins rising under the skin. "He's my son," I muttered, my voice hoarse. "I can't hate him." Ray leaned toward me, his voice sharpening. "You don't have to hate him. But you don't have to be his doormat either." That word, doormat, hit me like a slap, because deep down I knew that's exactly what I had been, for years. Paying the bills, showing up, getting brushed aside like it all meant nothing. I pulled into my driveway, the silence between us thick enough to choke on. When I finally killed the engine, I just sat there, staring at my house. The siding needed painting, the lawn was half dead, the porch light was still broken from last winter. Everything about my life screamed sacrifice. Everything I owned was worn thin because I'd poured my money into Ethan's dreams. And for what? To be told to go away like I was a stranger. Ray put a hand on my shoulder, grounding me. "Mark, I saw the look on your face in that church. I've never seen you that broken. You've got to ask yourself, when's enough enough?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I went inside, loosened my tie, and sat at the kitchen table with my head in my hands. My coffee mug from that morning was still sitting there, half empty, cold. I stared at it for a long time, my mind replaying not just today, but years of being taken for granted. Then it hit me like a lightning bolt. Every bill, every check, every contract signed. They were all in my name. The venue, the catering, the photographer, the band, even the florist. I had paid for all of it because Ethan had asked me to, because Linda had said they couldn't afford the wedding Ethan and his fiancée wanted. And I had agreed because I thought it was my chance to matter again. The humiliation curdled into something new. Not hatred, not revenge, but resolve. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my call history. The first number I dialed was the venue. My hands were shaking as the line rang, but when the manager answered, my voice was steady. "This is Mark Dalton," I said. "The account holder for the Dalton-Whitaker wedding this afternoon. I need to cancel payment, effective immediately." There was a pause on the other end. "Sir, are you sure?" "The event is in progress." "I'm sure," I said firmly. "No payment, no event, that's the contract, isn't it?" "Yes, but—" "No buts. Cancel it." My heart pounded as I hung up. For the first time all day, I felt, not happy, but powerful, like I wasn't invisible anymore. One by one, I called them all, the caterer, the photographer, the DJ, the florist. Each time I repeated the same words. Cancel it. Effective immediately. Some pushed back, some sounded shocked, but none of them could refuse. The money was in my name, the control was mine. Ray watched from across the table, his eyebrows raised higher with every call. Jesus, Mark, he muttered after I hung up on the last one. You really just pulled the plug on the whole thing. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling like I'd been holding my breath for years. They didn't want me there, Ray. But they wanted what I gave them. They can't erase me and keep my sacrifices at the same time. He studied me, then gave a slow nod. You're right. About damn time you stood up for yourself. The weight of what I had just done settled in my chest, a strange mix of relief and dread. I knew it would cause chaos. I knew people would hate me for it. But after years of being erased, overlooked, dismissed, I finally drew a line. That night I sat in silence, waiting for the fallout, waiting for the phone calls, the shouting, the accusations. And though part of me was afraid, another part of me was calm, because whatever came next, I wasn't powerless anymore. 3 hours later, my phone buzzed with the first furious call, and I knew the wedding wasn't a wedding anymore. The first phone call came 3 hours after I left the church. I was sitting on my porch, a cold beer sweating in my hand, when my phone buzzed across the wooden table. The screen lit up with a number I didn't recognize, but I already knew who it was. I answered. Mr. Dalton? This is the event coordinator at Pine Hill Venue. I don't know how to put this. The payments have been reversed, and without funds, we can't continue services. We've shut down operations for the Dalton-Whitaker wedding. Guests are very upset. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and let out a long breath. I told you to cancel it, I said simply. Then I hung up. What happened after that was chaos, and though I wasn't there to see it in person, I heard about every detail within hours, from Ray, from distant relatives, even from strangers who posted about it on social media. The first thing to go was the food. Halfway through the reception, just as guests were lining up for dinner, the catering staff began packing up trays of chicken, salmon, and roasted vegetables. People were confused at first, thinking maybe it was a mistake. But when the head caterer announced, "I'm sorry, folks, but service has been discontinued. We've been instructed to leave," panic set in. Then the photographer put down her camera. She'd been in the middle of snapping bridal party photos when she got the call confirming her services had been canceled. Without another word, she packed up her equipment and walked out. The bride's family begged her to stay, but she just shook her head and said, "Talk to the person who was paying me." The DJ wasn't far behind. 1 minute the music was blasting, the dance floor alive, and the next, silence crashed over the room. He shut off the speakers, unplugged his laptop, and told the stunned crowd, "I can't keep playing if I'm not being paid. Sorry, folks." Guests started whispering, laughter mixing with disbelief. Some thought it was a prank. Others thought it was the venue's fault. But then Linda stormed across the room toward Ethan, her heels clicking like gunfire against the hardwood floor. "What's going on, Ethan?" she demanded, her voice sharp. Ethan's face was red, sweat glistening at his temples. He pulled at his tie, muttering, "It's Dad. It has to be Dad." Everything was under his name. Linda's eyes widened, then narrowed into fury. "You let him control this? You let him pay for all of it?" The bride, Emily, stood nearby, her white gown shimmering under the chandeliers, tears already welling in her eyes. "What does he mean, Ethan? Is this true?" The guests fell silent, every ear straining to hear. Ethan looked like a man trapped, his lips trembling as he whispered, He paid for everything. The venue, the food, the band, all of it. And now he's canceled it." Emily's face crumpled. "So, you didn't pay for this wedding?" "He did, your father, the same man you told me wasn't worth inviting." When Ethan didn't answer, the dam broke. Emily covered her face and sobbed, her mother rushing to hold her. The bridesmaids exchanged horrified looks, some shaking their heads. Linda hissed at Ethan, her voice dripping with venom. "You humiliated him, and now he's humiliated you." "Congratulations. You've ruined your own wedding." The tension erupted into shouting. Some guests blamed Ethan, others blamed Linda, and still others laughed at the absurdity of it all. Plates clattered as staff removed dishes from tables. The band quietly packed up their instruments. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, what should have been a night of celebration had dissolved into a nightmare of finger-pointing, tears, and an empty hall. Back on my porch, I sat in the stillness, my phone buzzing non-stop with calls I didn't answer. Some were from relatives begging me to undo what I'd done. Others were from Linda, her voice spitting fire in voicemails that grew more desperate by the hour. Ethan called too, but I couldn't bring myself to pick up. Not yet. Instead, I stared into the twilight and whispered to myself, they didn't want me there. But they couldn't erase me. Not from this. It wasn't joy I felt, it wasn't triumph, it was something heavier, something darker. I knew I'd just burned a bridge I could never rebuild. But in that moment, part of me felt lighter too, like for the first time in years I wasn't invisible. The wedding was over. Not with vows, not with dancing, but with silence. Because without me, without my sacrifices, there was no wedding at all. That Section 5 fully expanded into approximately 700 words, capturing the public chaos, emotional fallout, and shocking reveal that Mark's quiet decision toppled the entire event. It's designed to be the most dramatic part of the story, keeping viewers hooked for the final reflection in Section 6, the aftermath. The day after the wedding, I woke up to silence. No music, no laughter, no family gathered around a table. Just silence. My phone was filled with missed calls and voicemails, but I didn't rush to listen. I knew what they'd say: anger, accusations, maybe even begging. None of it would change what had already happened. For years, I had lived my life bending over backward for people who never looked back to see if I was still standing. And the day of that wedding was the first time I finally stopped. By mid-morning, I forced myself to check the messages. The first was from Linda. Her voice was shrill with rage. "Mark, how could you do this to your own son? You embarrassed him in front of everyone. You've destroyed everything." She went on for 3 full minutes, blaming me for the disaster, as if I had walked into that hall and flipped tables myself. The next message was from Ethan. His voice was different. Less anger, more desperation. "Dad, please, call me back. We need to fix this. Emily's furious. Her parents are threatening to sue. I don't know what to do." He paused, his voice breaking. "Please, Dad." Just call me. I didn't. Not that day, not the next, because I needed time to sit with what had happened. Ray came by that afternoon, bringing a 6-pack and that same blunt honesty I'd leaned on my whole life. He dropped the beer on the table and said, "Well, you did it. You finally stood up for yourself. How's it feel?" I let out a hollow laugh. Like I just tore down the only bridge left between me and my son. Ray cracked open a bottle and handed it to me. "Maybe. Or maybe you showed him what respect looks like. He's been walking all over you for years. You taught him a lesson no one else could, but I wasn't sure." Sitting there on my porch, the autumn air biting at my skin, I felt both lighter and lonelier than ever. I hadn't wanted revenge. I hadn't wanted chaos. All I'd wanted was to stand quietly in the back of a church, to see my son take a step into his new life, to feel like I was part of it, even if just for a moment. Instead, I'd been erased, and erasure leaves scars deeper than anger ever could. The fallout from the wedding was exactly what you'd imagine. Guests went home hungry and bewildered. Emily's family was humiliated, their dream celebration collapsing into a nightmare. Some relatives cut off contact with me completely, calling me heartless. Others, surprisingly, reached out to say they understood. that they'd seen how Ethan treated me over the years, and maybe this was bound to happen sooner or later. But Ethan, he never came to see me. He never knocked on my door to explain, to apologize, or even to fight. He just went silent. For weeks, then months. I heard whispers that Emily had called off the honeymoon, that the relationship was strained. Maybe the wedding wasn't the only thing that fell apart that night. I wish I could tell you that my son and I patched things up, that the shock of what happened brought us closer. But the truth is, life doesn't always give you neat endings. Sometimes it just gives you silence. And yet, in that silence, I found something I hadn't had in years. Dignity. For so long, I thought being a father meant giving and giving until there was nothing left. I thought love meant sacrifice, no matter how much it hurt. But what I learned that day is this: love without respect isn't love. It's servitude. And I had been serving a son who no longer saw me as family. Do I regret it? Part of me does. Part of me lies awake at night wishing I had just swallowed my pride, let them enjoy their day and gone home quietly. But another part of me, the part that still remembers the weight of Ethan's words in that church, knows I had no choice. Sometimes walking away is the only way to stop being treated like you're disposable. Now, when I think back on that day, I don't picture the chaos, or Linda's fury, or even Emily's tears. I picture my son, standing in front of me in his tuxedo telling me to go away. That moment told me everything I needed to know. I may have lost a son that day, but I found something else: the strength to stop letting people decide my worth. And maybe, just maybe, that's the only lesson worth carrying. So let me ask you, if it were you, standing in that church, hearing those words from your own child, what would you have done? So that's my story. It wasn't easy to tell, and it's even harder to live with. But I shared it because I know I'm not the only one who's ever been pushed aside by someone they love. If this story hit you in any way, if it made you think about family, respect, or dignity, then I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below and tell me, if you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet, or would you have done what I did? And if this story kept you watching, please take a second to like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss the next story we dive into. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories alive. Thanks for being here with me today. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and don't ever let anyone erase your worth.